Hey guys, it's Mrs. Rago. So today what we are going to be doing is percent proportion. So I know that this might be a review for some of you, and it's also brand new for some of you. So this is really the only topic that should overlap, and then we'll all start new from the same page starting next week. So what I want you to do is get out your graph books and your pretty pens, and we're going to take some notes. So, as I mentioned, percent proportion is going to be the topic today. So with percent proportion, we've talked already about percents, we've talked already about proportions. We're going to kind of put it all together in one. So remember, a proportion is two equivalent ratios, basically like equivalent fractions. So this side is equal to this side. So when we do a percent proportion, what we're going to do is we're going to fill in 100 here because percents are always out of 100. And since percents are always out of 100, this is where your percent is going to go. This side of your proportion for this ratio is going to be is over of. And then this will all make sense in a minute. So this is the percent proportion. You can use this for any type of percent problem. Is over of equals your percent over 100. So when I work on this with my students, I always tell them to do a couple of different things. Basically 5 steps, but they're 5 pretty easy steps. So let's first look at an example of what we're talking about. So if I were to see a question that said, what is 20% of 30? What I would do is I would first identify my 3 parts. So I would identify my is, I would identify my of, and I would identify my percent. They don't have to be done in any specific order. You can identify any one that you want. It doesn't matter which one you do first. The next thing you're going to do is fill in the proportion. And finally, you are going to use cross products to solve. Okay? So I will stop there for a minute and give you a few to take a look at it, write down anything you need to write, and catch up with anything that you need to catch up on. So while you're doing that, I'm just going to do a quick highlight here. Okay. And here is our example that we're going to follow. So step number 1, we're going to look for is. Step 2, we're going to look for of. Step 3, we're going to look for the percent. Step 4, we want to fill in. And step 5, we want to do cross products. So really those are the important things that you need to remember. Okay, so let's look at what we have here. So for our example, we have what is 20% of 30. So when we do this, we are going to identify the different parts. So I see right here, I typically look for my numbers first and identify those, and then go back and identify my variable. So for example, right here, I can see that this says 20%. So that means that my percentage is going to be 20. Then I can see here that this says of 30. So that means my of, I'm going to fill in 30. And then finally, I have here, it says what is. Now when I see the word what, that means it's going to be a variable. So my is represents my variable. So now that we have that information, what we can do is fill in the proportion. So I'm going to do that here. So 100 is always given, so I'm going to fill that in right off the bat. Then I'm going to fill in my information. So my is, we're going to give it a variable. Any variable you want, I'm going to give it an X. My of, I have listed as 30. So according to this, is over of, so down here, I'm going to fill in 30. On the other side, our percentage is going to be 20, and percents always go out of 100, so I fill in my 20. From this point, we've done step 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we're going to do step 5 and use cross products to solve. I always have my kids start with the variable first. You don't have to. It's just we use it for consistency reasons. You can do it this way first or this way first. So we're going to do 100 times x. So 100 times x. That cross product has to equal the cross product on the other side. So 30 times 20. So now 100 times x is going to give us 100x equals 30 times 20. We can do 3 times 2 and get 6, and then add our 2 zeros, 600. Here we have to isolate our variable. So this is a one-step equation, so we want to divide both sides by 100. 100 divided by 100 is 1x, or just x. And then on the other side, we have 2 zeros in the numerator and 2 zeros in the denominator. So what we can do is get rid of those zeros. And now we just have 6 divided by 1, which is 6. So what that answer means is if I put 6 in here, 6 over 30 can simplify, and 20 over 100 can simplify, and they will both simplify to the same thing. Or 30 times 20 is going to give us 600. 100 times 6 is also going to give us 600. So that means that 20% of 30 is 6. So I'll give you a minute. Go ahead and copy down anything that you need to copy. And then what we're going to do is, my kids, we know we always do a practice problem. So I always write try me. So they're going to try this problem here listed. I'm just going to section that off to give us some workspace so it doesn't get mixed in with our notes. So for your try me problem, what you are going to do is this. 15 is what percent of 32? Okay, so what you are going to do right now is you are going to try that on your own, following your steps. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our proportion. We're going to fill in 100 down here because that is our given. Now we're going to identify the parts. So if I look at my numbers first, I have 15 is and I have of 32. So here they go together, and here we have what percent goes together. So now we're going to fill it in according to the percent proportion. 15 is, so that's going to go in the numerator. Of 32, of goes in the denominator. What percent? What means a variable? So we're going to give it a variable, x. So now what we're going to do, now that we've filled it in, is we're going to use cross products to solve. So 32 times x is 32x. That cross product has to equal this cross product. So 15 times 1 is 15. Add 2 zeros to that answer. Now we have a one-step equation. We want it to isolate the variable, so we divide both sides by 32. So we get 1x, or x equals 46.875. Sometimes you'll see it as a decimal, sometimes they'll ask you to round it, sometimes they'll ask as a fraction. For right now, we're going to leave it just like that. And that's all for today.